Hey friends, welcome to Entrusted to Lead, the place where clarity meets courage for leaders like you who are ready to design a life and an organization that reflects your deepest purpose. Today, my guest is Georgi Enthoven. She is a thought leader, a strategist, a coach, a writer, and a podcast host. And I am super excited to share our conversation today, where she helps us dig into those 90,000 hours of work where we spend the majority of our life. In this conversation, we're going to unpack what it really means to live with intention and how to structure, reflect, and align our lives and our values so that we can make the most meaning for ourselves and those around us. So grab your cup of coffee or your favorite beverage and let's get started. Leadership can feel really heavy sometimes, especially when you're carrying vision and people and purpose all on your shoulders, all at the same time. You have got a big mission, but the strategy feels fuzzy and your team is looking at you for clarity that you're not sure you actually have. I get it. It's hard. I'm Danita Cummins. I help faith-driven leaders like you find clarity, align with your values, and lead with confidence without burning out, because that's never okay. If you're ready to get unstuck, lead your team with courage, and to turn that God-given vision into strategy that really works, I want us to talk. Take the free leadership clarity quiz that I've created today, and I want you to schedule your no pressure coaching call, because together we can uncover what's holding you back and how to move forward in faith and confidence. Hey friends, welcome to Entrusted to Lead. I'm Danita, and today I am joined by my new friend and fellow podcast host, which I'm always super excited to meet people in the community, Georgi Enthoven. She's a founder and writer, and she hosts the Work That Is Worth It podcast. And she spent about 3 decades serving in a variety of industries and roles. And today she is on a mission to help individuals turn their career into work that is helping them find a career and a calling that's good for both them and for the world, which I think is super exciting. So we're going to just start today, jump into a conversation. So Georgi, how are you today? Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I am doing incredibly well and just really delighted to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. This is super fun. I love having conversations with fellow podcast hosts because I feel like it's like a very small community of people and we're just super excited about the work that we do. So I love having an opportunity to share space with my fellow podcasters. So
yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Your work and your story, I think, are both very powerful. So to start off, can you share kind of the pivotal moment that led you to start your journey into this life design and this intentional living space where you find yourself today?
Yeah, I love the question because it immediately makes me feel like I don't have the exact answer, but I tell you why I don't have the exact answer is because I like to think of my career as taking the scenic route or like a lot of zigzagging. And so I know the moment that I sort of started to find my groove, but I think all those, I don't want to say wrong turns, but turns that didn't end up being a direction I really wanted to pour myself into all have incredible nuggets that I have carried forward that got me to the point where I understood what was really the calling or the work that I find really worth it. And so for me, the real pivotal point of that was during COVID started being certified to become a coach. And I found that work so intriguing because it was so much introspection that I had never formally done before. And I was just so surprised that I had gotten through so many years of working and Harvard Business School and things like that, and still didn't ever know these answers to the questions or even know these questions I should be asking. And so that was like a real turning point. And at that time, I really sort of found my people in those classes and in that community. But I knew that I wanted to take that and use it for something afterwards. And quite quickly, I ended up, well, for me, I actually was on like a mini sabbatical and I had this download, I would say from the universe or wherever anyone believes of where you get these downloads from, but it was a creative download, like very deliberate and in a moment of time. And that was to write a book. And the book was really to help people use their careers for good. But it came from sort of 3 pieces of information that came together that day. And one was I read an article in the Harvard Business Review that the average career is 90,000 hours. And so I was just really amazed by that and thought, why didn't anybody ever tell me? Could break that up however you want, but that's such a large amount of time. And if we assume we all get that amount of time, then you're rich in hours, especially when you're starting your career. And then the second was these two women sitting on a sofa together, and they're talking, and the weather is in the background of all the tornadoes and floods and things happening in our climate. And they say, I don't think giving up straws is going to be enough. Those two pieces of information together just was like, we have to use ours in our careers to do something more than just giving up straws. And then just knowing the urgency of climate, how are we going to do better for our planet, do better for humanity, our communities, animals, and nature, and that we need to be making some drastic shifts. And I really believe business is a force for good. So the book came from the reading that I did and those sort of little provocations that then came together into something that completely ignited me.
That is so good. I love the backstory because I think that's the piece that most people, we see things, social media, or we pick up a book and we read it and maybe the author told the backstory. But I always love that when you flip to the back in the acknowledgments or that section where the author has taken the chance to say, this is what I was doing late at night when this idea or this concept came, and to see where it comes through all the different springing forth of life and all the different places that it will touch. So I think that's beautiful. Your brand speaks to designing a life that fits. So you're helping people find this place where calling and connection, but also doing it in a place that they show up in the workplace and what that looks like. Can you just talk a little bit more about that into detail and really from a perspective of what does that look like for someone who's leading a business, or maybe they're doing nonprofit or faith-based work or working in the government? What does that really look like for that person?
Well, in my book, I talk about 7 different pillars that I noticed are either questions people have about doing meaningful work with impact and income, and also from interviewing what I call these superstar role models who are already doing it and what they had that was really unique. And so it's different aspects that I would combine. But I think that what I noticed in talking with many, many people during this journey of writing a book is a lot of the people doing amazing work in the world that are really geared towards being givers of community, society, the world, often play small. And in my conclusion is we need to get these kindest, most generous people into places where they're making big decisions. And I don't think we're going to necessarily be able to take on capitalism in any short amount of time. So how do we get those people to play on a larger scale so that they can be in C-suites and in boardrooms, at least raising a voice for better, more humane decisions? And so that is really what I'm interested in. And I noticed it could be internal things or external reasons why they don't. But for instance, external would be like the teaching profession. Many teachers are really undercompensated for their work, and they're such a critical role in our society, and they do such valuable work. But that's something external that's very hard to change. But internal stuff is you feel like your great work, people need you, and therefore you can't charge. And so there's different aspects of that. But one of the chapters is compensation and really understanding holistically what gives you energy to keep going for 90,000 hours. And so that's, for me, is what I find is not just the income, but anything that's giving you energy and fuel to go.
I think that's so good. I haven't read your book, obviously, but I think just on the compensation piece, did you, when you were writing in the research that you did you unwrap some of the anxiety or fear or the uncomfortableness around the compensation piece? Because I see that a lot. I do a lot of coaching and consulting and I work in a nonprofit space. I do see that compensation piece come up a lot in the struggle between, should I get paid for this work? Is this heart work? And then there's almost this unrealistic expectation that heart work should be free.
Exactly. I think that's what keeps these people small. And I think if we can all just like hold together each other's hands and say, guys, we got to play bigger. We got to jump in, got to have bigger stages. We got to get the word out and actually make money, because money in the hands of good people is a great thing because they're investing it in other great things. And so I think sometimes we can look at money as not helpful, but we all need it. And there's nothing wrong with having access to money, having money, enjoying your life, and doing good. I actually end up categorizing people into 4 buckets that they relate to and they feel that they're in this stage. And one of them is the unrewarded do-gooder, which we've been talking about. And it's somebody who is just doing this amazing work for the world, but just not being compensated sufficiently for that work. And we all lose in that case because they burn out and we don't get those people making big decisions for our society.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. I'm in a personal journey of going through some different things and was just thinking about this last week, actually. So I appreciate that it's very timely. It's always, the podcast is always something that I'm personally working on in this season of my life where I'm like, oh, look, here's a person who has. So
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the opposite of that is what I would categorize as the uninspired achiever. And I talk to many of those people too. And these are people who've been climbing this ladder of success, maybe a ladder they didn't actually design or even seek out, but society told them that this is where you get all the accolades and the high fives, or they just really were chasing money, or they just needed security. No judgment on why you end up in these ladders. We all have different reasons, but on this path, people feel like, yes, they're very satisfied on their income, but they're left feeling hollow. They're left feeling empty. Maybe they don't like the people that they're around or the communities that they're in, or they feel misaligned in values. So it's sort of the flip of the problem.
Yeah, I see that a lot too. And I actually had a guest. We were talking earlier today about that very similar thing where her life was like that. She was in her corporate America ladder and was very successful in her career, but had a moment where she sat down on the floor and she was kind of like, is this all there is for the next 30 years of my life? Because if this is all there was the great emptiness that she felt, but she didn't really know why. And so I think that is very common. And to your point, I think it's very kind and gracious for us to give ourselves grace because, like you said, money is not the root of all evil, but different scriptures like to say. But the point of it is aligning your values and your heart and to the work that you do is so important. And most of us never get the chance to do that, or we jump out of home into school and we're often running with the world, and then we have responsibilities because food, clothing, shelter is a real thing. And then you wake up one day and you're kind of like, I don't really know how I got here.
I love what you just said. And that reminds me of part of what I do is I let you dream from like way up high and see this big picture of 90,000 hours. Like, how would you like to use that in a whole? And then there's also sort of really practical exercises of today. Let's look at your values. Let's understand your strengths. Let's know where your gifts are. That is all important.
I love that you said that you learned this when you went through your coaching program, because you had said you went through this coaching program and then started to see this deep work that you were needing to do for yourself that you had never had a chance to do. And I think most people find themselves there as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, so interesting because on my podcast, I interview people who I would say are disruptors for good. They are able to do careers, like you said, with like good for them and good for the world, or combining income and impact. And especially women, but it's not only women. If you say, tell me your strengths, like what are you really good at? What are your gifts? They may not have the words for it, or they will say something and I will repeat and say, you really are incredible at communication or getting people on board with what you believe in. And they have such a hard time holding that. Like it's always like, oh, really? Oh, well, that's really nice. Like the way we culturally expect people to show up in the world is not to embrace their strengths. And one of the people I interviewed in the book was this wonderful woman who started a company called Goldie Blocks, which is to get young girls into STEM. And she did it originally with toys, but it's also with media now. And when I interviewed her, I just loved that she was like, yes, these were my superpowers that really helped me. And these were my weaknesses. This is where I needed help. And it just was so refreshing to have somebody own it. And I don't think we're taught to do that so that we don't seem like a jerk or that we're modest. But there is something really great about actually knowing where you do stand out in a room and your gifts. And most of my early career, I lent into my weaknesses. So I spent a lot of time trying to level up where I wasn't strong. And so I was often in rooms where I was the least experienced person, and I found that really stimulating. But what that meant is I was never going to stand out. And I think if you are really leaning into your gifts and trying to find your calling or the thing that you're just meant to do, you've got to be comfortable owning your strengths and being able to communicate those to others.
I think that's so good. I'm on a team right now as a consultant, but I've been on it for several years, and the team was a startup. So it was just one or two of us. And now we have a pretty robust team. And so to that point, it's very good for me because I've been able to look at the team and say, as a new person comes in, you're like, okay, this person's going to take this now, which is something I'm holding, but I need to give it to them because they're way much better at this than I. And then where do I fit? And so I think that comes down a lot to when you talk about from a team dynamic perspective, the psychological safety and having a team of people who are all in a learning environment together where it's like, hey, no, I'm going to do this and these are my strengths and this is where I stand out. And then you can take this because you're much better doing this. But it's a collaborative, for me, it's a collaborative environment, right? Because if I were left by myself, I wouldn't probably be very good. But to have somebody on the other side of the table who's like, oh no, you're really good when you do XYZ, and I don't do that so well. So I'll take this piece, you take that piece. And anyway, it's working out really well in our team. I notice that it is very much everybody's working together. You can't always do it by yourself.
Yeah. And just being aware and intentional who you're surrounding yourself by really sort of sets you up for success.
I agree. That's very true. So what is one way that you help people identify where their current path is out of alignment with their calling? So we talked about that.
So the first place that I would start is understanding your capabilities. And that's a lot about what we've been talking about. So there's different aspects to your capabilities. And obviously it's sort of skills and strengths. But I actually include things like your values and perspective too, because I think a lot of the people that I have found and interviewed who are really doing meaningful work and being rewarded for it are doing something that they care about. And why do you care about it? Because you've experienced it, you've witnessed it, you felt it. So I think often we overlook that, especially for young people coming out of college. Nobody asks what they care about. They just are asked what they want to do. And so I do believe that that's an important place to start. And then the second piece is starting to think about what your contribution is. And this is sort of the big picture of these 90,000 hours, but not necessarily having to declare what you're going to be doing for the next, many, many years. But is there a theme or something that you want to become an expert in and be known for and be proud of? And I have like a in-depth way to sort of excavate things that are important to you. But at the end of it, if you only end up with one word, that's okay to start there. And it could be one or two words, or it could be sort of something like a declaration that you're able to say, for instance, like, I'm going to end homelessness in my generation. But it could start out with woman or the environment in Mexico or whatever it is, but it could start out with just one word or two that gives you a direction. And within your own company where you are already, you can already start integrating impact in that one area. But knowing what is sort of your anchor is really important. So it helps guide you and know what you say yes to and what you say no to, but it also gives you inspiration to get out of bed on Monday and to be creative and figure out how you're going to contribute to something that you really care about.
I think that's so good. And I love that you're like, start where you are. Because sometimes we have this mindset where we're like, I'm going to do this thing and it's way over there. Maybe you are, but don't get frustrated if you only have one word, like you said, or one little piece, because it takes time.
And I think the idea, because when I was getting into this work, people would say, what's your purpose? That feels really daunting. It feels like the purpose is going to land on your lap one day. And if it hasn't happened to you, then how sad. And I think of it in a different way. I think you build your purpose, and you do that by paying attention to what's important to you and being intentional with how you're spending that time. And so starting off with one word allows you to get into a community of people who also value that. And then it probably will get more funneled down to something more specific as you have more experience. But that's going to take time. It's not something that you build overnight. Anyone who can come into a room and say, I'm going to help you figure out your purpose in the next 30 minutes, I believe is very difficult. But what we can do is get your direction right. And having a direction will really change so many of the decisions that you're making day to day that you would have made without this. And it just, when you ask the initial question of how did you get going on this path, all the wrong turns help get you onto the right turns. And so, but knowing if there's something that you're working towards, my hope is that you get there earlier on in your career so that you can do the most good that we can benefit from your career hours.
I think that's so good. I have the same perspective. I think that purpose is like the concept that we have purpose today, because I was just doing a book club last night, so we were talking about it. But purpose is this perception that we are going to find a lost treasure at the end of the rainbow, right? It's like a coat that you put on, and then once you have that coat, that's just what you're going to wear the rest of your life. But life doesn't really work like that, because people live and people die, and companies are there and then they're not, and jobs last for a period of time and then they come to an end. And so just in my life and my journey, I've seen all of these different things where it's like the role that we hold becomes the purpose of who we are. But then what do you do when that role ends, right? And so it really back to our identity in this very core place of who we are And I think it's more simple in some ways, like you're saying, the value system, the structure of holding on to these core handles or values that you hold, despite what job or role that you might have today or tomorrow. But I do see, I think we talked about it before, this anxiety, right? Where everyone, especially young people, but older people too. I know my 93-year-old grandmother was struggling with what is my purpose at the end of her life because she had lived this full life and her body could no longer do the things that she wanted to do, but her mind was still very much active every day. And so she found herself in this place of, what is my purpose now? So I see this struggle on both sides, young high school graduates and college freshmen, and then single moms and career people. And anyway, so I think it's beautiful that you're helping people to unwrap that in a much deeper way than maybe just the job that you have today.
Trying to be perfect and having everything wrapped up is like, it makes it very difficult to start. And so I often will hear people trying to make excuses why they can't figure out something that's important to them, the logic will go something like, oh, I know someone who's very into climate change and is someone who's very passionate about it, but she wears leather. And so in a way that sort of in their mind is sort of canceled out the whole thing because not all the checks are there. And I think it's really important two things. One is just get started. Better today is better than not moving at all in the direction you want to go in. So just get started and find the right balance. You're making the choices and trust yourself to be making the right choices. And the second is, I really don't encourage people to spend time judging what others are doing. You may not understand it, but to think you know better for the other person is something that I definitely got out of coaching, is we just don't know where people are sitting. We can't feel what's going on in their body and their mind. And so we really don't have expertise on anybody else. What we do know is our own journey and our own preferences. And so we may have a feeling of like, that wouldn't be for me, or I would need to go further on that journey for it to be legitimate, or whatever your personal feelings are for you. But we don't know about others. So it's not a good use of our energy and time to spend time worrying what others are doing.
I wonder, because my next question is really related to like the person that feels like they're pulled in multiple directions or they feel overwhelmed in order to move forward. And I can assume that what other people think is a factor in that too, right? So the same thing as you're saying, we're considering or thinking, assuming what other people believe, but it comes back to us on the other side of that. What are people going to believe or think about me doing X, Y, Z? So do you have any advice or words of wisdom for a person who's in that place where they're like, I do want my 90,000 hours to matter and I want to kind of maybe get off this ladder and move forward?
I mean, early on in my book, I have this little scale and it's 2 questions. Good for you, good for the world, on a 0 to 10 of those 2 questions. And where are you now as far as your career is good for you and is good for the world? And you mark a little X on the line. And then where do you want to be in 2 years? And you mark that on the line. And so you've got these 2 gaps potentially. Look to see where the gaps are. If there's no gap, then okay, you're okay with that right now. But if there is a big gap, that's your clue to what to do next. And so if it's somebody who's really undercompensated and working incredibly hard, they probably need more for them. And so let's think about and strategize and open up to the universe. What would an option be using the skills that you've already developed to allow you to bring in more income? And I walk through different options in the book, but like it could be moving to a different city that costs less, but it could also be taking a job on the side where you are using your expertise and being able to do a consulting project, or it could be switching in from education to ed tech or something like that. There are options always to do better financially if that is holding you back. And I think being aware of where you are is really important. And we all value different jobs. We will all have our own fulfillment in different jobs. So what works for you might not work for me and the other way around. And so you really just focus on you and understanding what the next step is to see where those gaps are. And that'll help you determine what's next.
I think that's so good. And I think there is a good practice in terms of getting feedback from others, right? So like you're saying, hey, this is something that I want to do, or it's important, or has anybody else ever done this? Or I can get more ideas like you're saying, because maybe I'm in the place where I don't know. And so it's really great to be able to come alongside somebody, a coach or a group, and say, oh, they did it like this. This is an option. But I also find that to be a lot detrimental as we go, because then we're, to your point, looking at everybody else and you're saying, hey, well, what are they doing? Instead of just, well, what does your heart say? And that's hard to do. It's vulnerable. So I don't say it lightly, but I do love how you're like, just focus on you. Here's your matrix and where are you at?
and be honest with yourself, and it's okay. And I always think any feeling of jealousy or resentment, or they're all giving you great messages. So I think we sort of have this fear of having any of these negative emotions, but they're giving you such great information. So if you are, for instance, doing this amazing work in the world and you're undercompensated and your friends are being able to afford vacation and you can't go, and you're feeling jealous about it, that is your clue that you would like more. And that's okay. That doesn't make you a bad person. And I think those are sort of the internal things that we deal with, that it's easier to fix the internal stuff than the external. I mean, you've got more control over it. But those kind of things are, what if you allowed yourself to earn more? And what would it look like? And what would the compromise be? And it is job craft. It's not quick checks that all of a sudden you get there. But I do think also on the flip side is really understanding compensation from a holistic standpoint. So often we get energy from working with somebody incredible, like a role model, or being able to work from home, or having flexible hours, or being part of a really incredible community of people that believe in something that's so aligned with. All those things give us energy. So don't take those off the table and switch and then realize that you've gone to the uninspired achiever camp and have none of the impact and realize you're now in the same boat, just on the flip.
Yeah, that's so good. Sometimes we don't realize those other motivators that we have. That's so powerful. So the last question I had, and then I want you to be able to share about your podcast and your book and all the amazing things that you're doing, is what encouragement would you give to a leader who feels like they've kind of outgrown their current situation, but they fear stepping into the unknown?
I like to think of those people as, I guess that's giving you a great clue that you need to be more of a disruptor, more of a rebel, you are looking for some more adventure. And so I would think, like, what is the problem that you want to solve? And that's worth your time and energy. And so think way bigger and dream. And the way that I like to think about that is in coaching, I often find people, they'll say, oh, my work situation's not great. If I could just have something 10% better. 10% better of mediocre is still pretty mediocre. What if you got thousands of percent better? Like, what is that dream? And what if you only got to 70% of that? That's still so much better than the 10% better than mediocre. So I think a really important part about coaching in general, but this doesn't require a coach. It's just you being able to ask yourself these questions of, if I have a blank canvas, what is the dream? If I had a magic wand, like, what's the dream? If I could do it, if I could reach for the stars, and don't worry about, oh, but I couldn't do that for this reason, or I don't have the resources, or I don't have the contacts. Don't worry about any of that stuff yet. Just figure out what is the dream. If you could have a certain contribution to the world or make a difference in a certain way, what is that? And then what are 3 to 4 steps that would get you closer to that? And so you then backtrack it. But if you can dream it, you can make it happen. We see that all the time. And humans are incredibly gifted at that. So you really are limited by the dreams that you're going to have, how big you are willing to dream. So I would say that is like an important part of any leader, of let yourself be more of a disruptor.
I love that you're only limited by the dreams. That's so good. Yeah, my friend passed away last year. And when I came home, I spent about a week just here. I spent some time in that space. And so I think we do have those moments of reflection, like you're saying, when something hard happens or different periods of our life. But we don't have to wait for that. We don't have to wait for the really hard stuff, because to your point, 90,000 hours is a lot of hours. And so you can start dreaming today, right where you are.
Yeah. And if it feels daunting to you, again, that's your clue to find something more exciting.
Because I go back to, in this season of my life, you only get one life. So you got to make the best out of whatever you have. And the world needs us. I think that's my heart where it is you can ease the suffering of others in a billion different ways.
Yes, but not at your own cost.
That's exactly right. Not at your own cost. That's exactly right. Well, do you want to tell everybody about the book and the podcast?
Sure. I will tell anyone who's interested in writing a book, one of my early filters would be, are you willing to talk about this for the next 10 years at least? Because I think any book that you put time and energy into is going to take a lot longer than you expected, but it really needs your passion to be able to live and expand and have a chance to resonate with others. And so the book is called Work That's Worth It, and can help anybody who is trying to figure out how to have a career in income and impact. And in the book, I really talk about what is the contribution you want to make and compensation that matches that. And there's lots of stories in the book, and there's exercises and questions that to get you thinking. So it gives you inspiration, but also can give you the discipline to how do you do this? And it's really about getting your direction right. Like, I don't land you a job at the end of the book. I'll tell you what you're going to be doing, but you will feel like you are directionally heading in a more aligned place. And the podcast I launched alongside of it because when I was interviewing people for the book, I realized there's only so many pages, and thank goodness I have a good editor that cut my million words down to 50,000 or whatever it ended up being, because nobody wants to read all those other words. But I found it's just so inspiring to me to be able to shine the light on these incredible humans doing this great work and feeling really rewarded and excited. And there's so many different kinds of people, and especially young people today seem to be funneled in a very narrow path for success and of what success looks like. And I am really committed to showing people there's so many options. And I think only once you can hear it and understand different pathways can you start being creative and realizing what the opportunities are for you. So the podcast is a very diverse look of all different kinds of people from around the world, different genders, different religions, different, whatever it is, but they have all found their way to fulfillment. And so it just talks about their stories and how they got there and what's important to them and the mission that they're on. And that's also called Work That's Worth It. And it's available in most places you get your podcast. So I'm very excited about those. I don't know if you've experienced this, but one of the things that I know that I love to celebrate other birthdays, but like to shine light on other people. And one of the harder parts of this is like actually accepting some of the light myself, because I'm usually like, no, look at these great people. But in the process, one of my learnings is how am I willing to hold some of the light alongside that so that I can get the message out?
That's so good. It is hard. It is hard. I published my book in September, October last year, and it was really hard to go on the podcast and talk because I'm used to asking all the questions on this side. And you said highlighting somebody's amazing story and how they do. So it has been an adjustment for me to balance between that. But I do agree with you. I think that when you have a message like that on your heart and then you get to share that with other people, and our book club that we started last night was just my book. So it was our first night.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I think I have like 15 of my friends all sign up to say, yes, I'd love to come. But it's so incredibly humbling to be able to sit at the table. And then you're just like, they read my book. That's so crazy. And then all the pieces that they picked out of it and all the things that resonated with them. And so it's just this beautiful thing. So I would encourage you totally to do that if that's not on your author journey.
Yeah, I love that idea. And what it makes me realize is this expansion, because my instant reaction would be like, okay, enough about me. Let's hear about everybody else. But for one night, for people to be generous and to really engage in the work and your thought leadership is a beautiful thing.
And I'll say one of the ladies that joined last night, she says, I've never been a part of a book club with the author. And I thought, oh, me neither. So I think the lesson is how much of a blessing, just like you said, all these people are such a blessing to others, but then don't block your own blessing.
100%. Also, I pick a word for myself every year, and my word for this year is expansion, because I do sometimes find myself blocking it, maybe because I'm like scared or not ready, and so every time I'm like, Georgie, expansion.
Yes, that's so good. Open hands. I say open hands. That's what open hands, open heart. Yeah, just let it in and let it out. And so that's so good. Well, I'm super excited. We'll put all the links in the show notes, and the podcast is, I can say from having listened to it, it's really, really great. So definitely subscribe to whatever platform.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, keep doing amazing things. I'm super excited. And please keep us updated on how it goes. We would love to have you come back and we can talk more about your exciting adventures.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I really appreciated the questions and the depth of the conversation.
Hey, friends. Well, if there's one thing that you can take away from today's conversation, it's this. You don't have to stay stuck in a life or a leadership model that no longer works for you. You have the power and you have the permission to design something new. Georgie reminds us that clarity isn't just a luxury, it is a strategy. And so I hope that you found her message to be encouraging and filled with lots of tools and tips. Don't forget to grab her book and pop over and listen to her podcast. I am sure you will be inspired just as much as I have been. And the most impactful leaders are the ones who lead themselves first. So don't forget that. And here's today's reflection question that I want to leave with you. What area of your life or leadership feels misaligned? And what small change could you make this week to bring it one step closer to the life that you truly want to lead? I don't know what it might be for you. I have some ideas for myself. So make sure you take time this week to write that down and reflect and think about your leadership and your legacy, because it truly, truly does matter, friend. And don't forget to keep showing up every day, even when it hurts, because you matter too. Have an amazing day. I'll see you later.